Hey, I was in the kitchen and, well, did you notice this?
Oh yeah, I saw it. I guess some people here are just, slacking off.
You know, it feels like I've heard this debate a million times now, and yet arguments rarely seem to be based on anything else than basic appearances.
Well, yeah, but then again, that's usually the only information people have access to.
That's true, but do you know what has access to better, more in-depth and unbiased information?
Is it science?
Science! In fact, with so many people debating the utility of work breaks, it is only natural that researchers would want to look at the veracity of their claims. And this is exactly what we are going to do today. More precisely, we are going to look at three main types of variables and the effects work breaks have on them. In order to answer the question once and for all, are work breaks overrated? But a quick clarification before we start. In this video, we are going to focus exclusively on small breaks within a workday. So think those will last only a few minutes in order to get a cup of coffee, for example. So I'm excluding lunch breaks and holidays, as those need to be considered in a very different way. With all that said, let's dive in with the first and perhaps most commonly discussed variable: performance. A common concern when it comes to discussing breaks is that it is time spent not working, and therefore not productive. On the other hand, a counter-argument is that breaks serve as a sort of investment. Okay, you might not be working for a few minutes, but you will be much more efficient afterwards, thus compensating the time lost. So, where does the truth lie here?
Well, in a 2001 study, researchers Dabamne, Swanson, and Shell investigated the impact of rest breaks on the productivity of workers in a meat processing company. First, they looked at the number of pieces of meat prepared during a normal day. Then they repeated their observations, but this time by giving short recurring rest breaks throughout the day. And what they found was that indeed, giving frequent rest breaks would increase productivity significantly, especially at the end of the day. In some cases, the number of pieces of meat prepared being quite literally doubled.
Terrific coffee.
However, when taking into account the opportunity loss, things end up evening out. Essentially, the increase in productivity just compensates for the time lost during the break. So overall, productivity ends up being neither better or worse.
This echoes the results of a different study concerning this time to work of nurses. Here it was found that breaks had neither a positive or negative impact on the quality of care of patients.
Oh, this coffee is criminal.
Okay, but that's just two studies, right? What if we increased the scope? What if we took a whole bunch of different studies, spanning multiple different professions, add them all up together, and looked at the general effect? Well, this is exactly what researchers Vench, Lohmann Heisler, and Vega did in their meta-analysis. And what they found was a small positive effect of breaks on performance. In other terms, this means that in general, yes, breaks do improve performance. But just by a little bit. Considering those results, perhaps performance isn't really the best way to look at this problem. I mean, after all, many people would argue that the point of taking breaks isn't really to improve performance per se, but rather to recharge their own batteries, allowing them to last longer on the job. So again, how true is that? Do breaks really have a regenerative effect?
Well, in a study focused on truck drivers, researchers Blanco and colleagues investigated the impact of breaks on the safety of those workers. By implementing numerous sensors on the trucks, the researchers were able to gather large amounts of data on the driving behaviors of their subjects. More specifically, what they were looking for was the frequency of dangerous events, like unintentional deviations or near-crash experiences.
Deja vu, I just been in this place before. Higher on the street and I know it's my time to go.
This way, they could look for variations in safety risks depending on multiple variables like the hour of the day, or you guessed it, breaks. And what they found was quite significant. When comparing driving behaviors 1 hour before and after a break, they observed a drop of around 30% less dangerous events encountered, making breaks an interesting tool in order to increase safety and counteract the negative effects of time on task.
For those who might not know, time on task refers to the different effects that come with spending a lot of time on a given task.
One such effect is that one's attention and effectiveness tends to gradually decline with time, especially when working on a complex task.
So what you're getting at here is that breaks should help you realign yourself on long and complex tasks, but not so much on short, simple, and repetitive ones, right?
Well, wrong, but not for the reasons you might think of. See, repetitive work comes with multiple well-known disadvantages, one of which being physical discomfort. For all office workers out there, if you ever felt that your back was especially stiff by the end of a workday, you know exactly what I am talking about.
Spending long hours in the same position and making the same movements causes musculoskeletal discomfort, which, if not addressed, can turn into actual pain and more serious health issues, forcing workers to seek medical treatments and the companies to deal with more medical leaves and high rates of turnover. In fact, some researchers estimated that the total cost of musculoskeletal disorders in the European Union could go up to 2% of the total GDP.
But alright, what does this have to do with breaks? Well, it turns out that the simple fact of standing up and having a little walk every now and then can do wonders at reducing the feelings of physical discomfort. So taking into account their effects on time on task, physical health and safety, I would say that yes, breaks absolutely have a strong regenerative effect. Up until this point, we haven't really looked at the content of breaks themselves, and we probably should. I mean, people don't usually stand around doing nothing. They have a cup of coffee, eat something, and usually do so with other people. This social element can lead people to believe that breaks are essential to create a positive work climate. Then again, it's also possible to express a lot of doubt regarding this claim. I mean, a lot of interactions during breaks end up being short, informal, and undirected, meaning that they are at risk of being quite shallow. So, once again, let's explore that.
In one of their studies, researchers Barmeyer, Mayhofer, and Würfel observed the behaviors of workers around the coffee machine in 3 different companies in Italy. What they found was that workers would often use that space to share work-related information. More precisely, they identified 8 different informational functions, like coordinating workflows, sharing advices, or engaging in problem solving.
Of all those functions, the one I personally find to be the most fascinating is the reduction of the hierarchical barrier. So essentially what researchers observed was that people from different levels of the hierarchy ladder would interact with each other in front of the coffee machine. So they would exchange ideas, points of views and concerns with people they would normally never interact with, thus making sure that the lower levels of the hierarchy ladder would feel like their voices were being heard, while at the same time increasing trust towards the people in the higher levels of the hierarchy ladder. So that's great, it's awesome, and yeah, it's back to the script. With all that said, this study does have some limitations. First, although not observed, the researchers do consider the potential negative effects of breaks, like the spread of rumors. I don't want to get too much into that because it's kind of a complex subject, but in short, there are ways to counteract the spread of negative rumors. The main strategy being to have open, frequent internal communication. The more information flows, the least susceptible your company is to the spread of negative rumors. A second limitation comes down to the culture. I mean, after all, in a country like Italy, it is pretty normal to engage in spontaneous, informal discussions with total strangers, even outside of work. But it is not necessarily normal in every other country out there. So, there's room for a question here. Would we see the same phenomenon happen if we repeated this study in a completely different culture, like let's say the one we find in Denmark?
To explore that, let's have a look at a similar study by Strobach done in the land of the smørbrød. This time, it was found that breaks were conducive to the creation of coping communities, meaning it was a way for workers to get together and deal with the frustrations of day-to-day work. Moreover, they mentioned that breaks were great for the socialization of new employees. That being said, they also noted that entering those coping communities as a newcomer could be somewhat difficult. A way they identified to circumvent this difficulty was to go through meetings with an informal tone. Like whenever someone shared a cake during a meeting, for example.
No one really can resist a rich, moist cake.
Taking all of this together, it suggests that even across cultures, it is possible to harness the potential of breaks to improve socialization or the informational flow. However, companies do need to do their homework first. They need to keep in mind both national and the organizational cultures in mind in order to make the most out of breaks. So, in conclusion, do breaks improve the work climate? I would say yes, but with an asterisk. Alright, let's get to the point. The final verdict, the red pill that will forever change your daily routine. Are work breaks overrated? Nah? Not really. Granted, there's always room for additional research, but based on what we currently have, a pretty clear picture seems to already form itself. At the very least, breaks do not seem to impair performance, but they do come with additional benefits, such as reducing levels of physical discomfort or helping you regain focus during long and complex tasks. Most importantly, under the right conditions, work breaks are still productive time, as they can improve the flow of information, socialization, problem solving, and the overall work climate. I like this type of exercise because it shows how multifaceted things can be. I mean, after all, humans are complex creatures and we work in complex systems, so it only makes sense that when tackling a subject seemingly as simple as the one of work breaks, we would need to look at multiple different aspects that are often overlooked or could seem invisible. And by extension, it could be useful for companies to hire people who can see and understand all those invisible aspects, how they interact with each other, and how they form the whole picture. You know, people like, IO psychologists, for example. Just saying. Thank you very much for watching. This was a very fun subject to tackle, but believe you me, there's even so much more to say about the frequency of breaks, their length, the types of activities, etc. So if you're interested, feel free to look at the description below where you can find all the sources used in the making of this video, or simply share your comments, share your experiences, your thoughts, opinions, and your questions on the subject. Those are always very much appreciated. So, with all that said, I would like to leave you with the very wise words of Special Agent Dale Cooper.
I'm gonna let you in on a little secret. Every day, once a day, give yourself a present. Don't plan it, don't wait for it, just let it happen. It could be a new shirt at the men's store, a cat nap in your office chair, or 2 cups of good, hot, black coffee.